to summarize where we are after the 3 days, and then to try and consolidate what we've learned and formulate, by the end of this conversation, a sort of action plan, a roadmap going forward for where we can take all of this good conversation and data. As Paul said, I'm Nick Cook. I was a journalist. I'm a consultant at the moment. I'm also a writer. So a part of my job today is to take the narrative as I've learned it and as I've seen it and as you've outlined it, and to sort of stitch it together in a way and feed those elements of the narrative into a story going forward. And I think it's a very exciting story that I've heard here in the last 3 days, and it's been brilliantly told chapter by chapter by you lot. So we're going to consolidate that now in the form of the panel discussion. We've got a lot to get through, and there are a lot of people on the panel. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you all to the audience. And just to say to the audience that I'm going to seek to get at least one question to everyone in the hour and 20 minutes that we've got. But obviously, I want to flow the conversation and discussion in as natural a way as possible. So we'll seek to do that. So without further ado, my panel consists of Paul Pereira, who is founder of Vassal and My Mask Fit, and who obviously has been our moderator for the last couple of days. And as many of you know, Paul is ex-Airbus, Rolls-Royce, BAE Systems, and GKN Aerospace. So stellar credentials in aviation and aerospace. We then have Jackie Castle, who is the UK engineer for A380 Airbus. We have Phil Smith, Managing Director of Business West. Claire Gibson, Head of Delivery, Heart of the Southwest LEP. Ben Rhodes, Deputy Director Southwest at the CBI. Simon Earls, Planning and Sustainability Director at Bristol Airport. Helen Isles, Senior Policy Advisor, West of England Combined Authority, WECA. David Morgan, Director of Flight Operations and Lead on Future Flight Technology at EasyJet. Toby Savage, Leader of South Gloucestershire Council and Deputy Mayor, WECA. Simon Henley, Business and Industry Strategy Advisor at Reaction Engines. And Ben Harrop, Hydrogen Economy Lead at Department of Business Enterprise, Innovation and Skills, BAYS, whom we've recently heard. So, Paul, I want to come to you first. What have been your key takeaways from this summit, and have any surprises been delivered in it?
So I think very quickly, if we sat here a year ago, I would have been thought as a crazy person to be bringing up hydrogen going into aerospace and aviation. And I know that the smirk on David's face, but I've been working in the background on this for some years. And Simon knows when I was at Rolls-Royce, I was probably the lone wolf trying to push hydrogen into aviation. So I guess what I've heard is I'm not so crazy after all. On that hand, I think there's still a lot of work to do, and there's so many challenges that we need to solve. But if we look back in this year, and I think the one thing that I've learned is technology is there to help us. You know, Kim and I worked together through the ventilator challenge as PA Consulting, and Rolls-Royce was also there, Airbus as well, Jackie. We learned that actually in collaboration and applying technology, we can solve almost anything. And I think from the spirit of the last 3 days has been really positive. You know, we're in the most dire times if we really want to look at aerospace in terms of where we are this minute. But actually our long-term future, because of this collaboration, because of this change, and I call it change in the air, as I spoke about earlier in the week, I think it's really seriously impressive how we've been able to bring such great individuals and knowledge from all the companies together and see a different light. So I have a positive outlook on the next 10 years and forecast that we'll be flying hydrogen, every one of us, in that time frame.
Well, I have to say, as a sort of semi-impartial observer in all of this, what I've really enjoyed hearing is the fact that this is a forum that has brought together, many viewpoints, many sectors, and whilst it is focused on aviation, it is not exclusively about aviation, and that's what I think is such a it's a very powerful message. That before we turn to some of the other sector inputs into this narrative, I wanted to come to Jackie Castle of Airbus. Jackie, Airbus's association with the region is long and well known. How impressed are you by what you've heard here in the past few days? And what do you think that the UK supply chain in aerospace, to begin with, must do in order to cement its future with Airbus, which is so critical in this hydrogen story for aviation going forward?
Well, thank you. I agree that I believe it's been really inspiring these last few days. We've seen lots of synergies across all of the different sectors of the industry. And in a world that's been very difficult over the past year, especially for the aerospace industry, but for everybody really, where everything seems to be put on hold, it's really good to see how much working, how much stepping forward everybody is doing with regards to energy for the future and climate change. So I think it's really, really inspiring. As I said, I can see synergies across the different, regardless of the products that you're in. So if we talk about rail or other transportation means, or aerospace, or just energy in general, I mean, there's really a key link between them all, and that is how we develop the infrastructure to support those products. And I think there's lots that we can do to work together to look at, the safety and certification and infrastructure aspects of sort of taking hydrogen forward for the future. So it's certainly given me a lot to think about, and I'm sure it's the same for all of the different industries. To come to your second question around cementing people's inputs into this direction that we seem to be going in for the future. Of course, the established supply chain, if you like, every industry needs to change to survive and needs to look forward and needs to see the direction of sort of growth of their industry. And I'm sure that the existing supply chain are understanding the sort of direction things are going in and looking at what that means for their current portfolio and what that means they need to develop in terms of skills or products for the future. But I think there's also new, we're talking about an evolution potentially here in aerospace. It's not just an incremental change this time. And it requires new skills and potentially new entrants into this industry. And so perhaps one of the best ways that those sorts of people can get involved with the bigger organisations is through some of the research initiatives that are going on at the moment. And a lot of things like the catapult that we've heard about earlier. And there are many avenues through ATI as well to get funding into and to bring their specialisms and their expertises into the direction that we're going. So, I hope that helps answer that question. That's our thoughts.
It does. Thank you. And before I let you go, Jackie, I just I had one supplemental. This is obviously a regional story that we are here to talk about. But I wondered, given the enormous disruptions that we've seen over the past year in aviation, not just in terms of the pandemic, but also with Brexit, of course, how fit do you think the region is and the country in Airbus's eyes to take this exciting clean energy future forward?
Okay, well, if I turn just to the UK aspect first, then Airbus understands that its UK workforce is a highly skilled workforce, and that we're a key integrated part of Airbus as a company. So actually, I think whilst Brexit, of course, been a concern for everybody, and a lot of uncertainty sort of around it for a long time, I think now that we know where we are with it, we can move forward, and I don't see a particular issue for Airbus as a company and the inputs that the UK brings into that. Turning more to the southwest, I mean, I think it's been a real eye-opener to listen to all of the discussions that we've had, and this summit has been really excellent. It just goes to show that we've got such a breadth of skill and knowledge and resources, if you like, in the southwest, that we really should be pushing forward with plans for what this region can take from the opportunities that present themselves. And I agree with Kim earlier that it's really, climate change to some extent is an opportunity, and we need to take that and really go with the momentum that we see at the moment. I think the other thing I was going to say is that I think it's more possible perhaps for regions to take a path of their own because of the way the energy can be generated in much more sort of local hubs. So if the region can look at that and see what it needs and what electricity generation is more suited to this area, then we should be able to find the best sort of efficient means to move forward. So I think there's a lot of opportunity and hope for the future, and we really need to grasp it and to move forward with this momentum that we've seen over the past few days.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I wanted to turn to Phil Smith of Business West next. Phil, obviously, as Jackie said, this is we've been focusing on the region, and rightly so. How prepared do you think the Southwest is for the challenge that's been set out in this summit? And what do you think it will do for the regional economy if it can get it right?
As a recovering oil and gas engineer, Nick, I've really enjoyed the last 3 days. It's been fascinating, and I've learned an awful lot about hydrogen that I didn't know on Monday. First of all, I think we are in competition with other regions. There's some good talk, preparation from Bays and people and covering the whole bit. But we are, there are 8 or 9 or 10 hydrogen hubs already in existence across the UK. So we have to recognise we're in competition. 1, 2. I think Paul beautifully described the kind of we are well set up for the supply side of hydrogen, even if we're not particularly strong at it at the moment with our wave, with our tides, sometimes with our sun. But it's the demand side that I saw today, the last 2 days, is fragmented, and we need to pull together, I sense, to make it reduce the commercial risks, Nick, and make it cheaper, and encourage investment in both the supply side and the kind of the production and the supply side. So I think we do need a common goal out of this. We need to a common goal for the Southwest. We need a plan, and we need some leadership, which I think Paul and Colin have shown through this summit. I think the wind's in our favour, however. We are still, I think, a levelling up region. We're not the North, we're not Midlands, but we're certainly not London and the South East. So that might go in our favour in terms of future government funding. In terms of your second question, Nick, I think imagine the spin-outs we could get from spin-outs, and I hear some cooling engineering and plane structures and all that kind of innovation we could get out of a hydrogen industry. Think of all the inspiration of startups, of people wanting to work in this industry. Think of the talent we could attract from around the UK and across the world, because young engineers who want to work in advanced engineering but also want to save the planet. Hydrogen is a fantastic industry to attract young, talented engineers into. And lastly, and back to Jackie's point, aerospace needs this. Aerospace industry in the Southwest is pivotal. It's one major employer, and the supply chain is huge. It has ambitions, it has challenges. If hydrogen can play its part in taking our aerospace industry into a new generation, then that would be fantastic.
Thank you very much indeed, Phil. And of course, I think, again, from a semi-outsider's point of view, what is so exciting about this is that everyone pretty much in the UK will be familiar with the extraordinary history of invention and innovation that is vested in the Southwest. We only need to look to Bristol's heritage as a centre of invention and innovation to know what a part that the region has played in the whole country's sort of industrial history. What I what I'm very mindful of, though, is that whilst this is a regional story, we need to keep it in a national perspective. And we've heard a compelling case from Gitto about the Welsh hydrogen story. Claire Gibson, head of delivery at Heart of the Southwest LEP. I wanted to ask you, Claire, whether the Southwest's effort in hydrogen can not only serve the Southwest's interests, but also complement other strategies in other regions. So, for example, from what we heard from Gitto, can that be complemented, do you think, by what the Southwest is planning in its own hydrogen energy revolution?
Well, I think it has to, really. I mean, if you look at the industries that we've got, the transport networks, they don't recognise regional boundaries, and therefore we have to make sure that we're collaborating across different partnership organisations. And so we need to work together, and this conference has been great in engaging us all to start thinking about this. I mean, certainly from our perspective at the Heart of the Southwest LEP, we're just dipping our toe, to be honest, into this. We've got a very strong commitment to clean and inclusive growth, writ large in our local industrial strategy. We're just pulling together a delivery plan for clean growth so that we're clear about what we can do to play our part to make sure that the region is future-proofed, but also trying to capitalise on those opportunities. But we won't be able to deliver it by ourselves, so we need to make sure that we're looking north and working with our friends in the west of England area, across the border to Wales, but also thinking further west down to Cornwall, and obviously to the east we've got Dorset. So we have a real opportunity here by adding value, in my view, if we collaborate together rather than go it alone. And given the discussions that we've had over the last few days, that's exactly what the certainly the demand side is going to be doing. When you try and look at how you service the transport network, for example, they're not going to be stopping at our border or the West of England's border. They're going to be thinking how you get from Birmingham down to Plymouth and Penzance. So we absolutely need to be working together on this.
Thank you, Claire, very much indeed. Actually, I'd like to bring Kim and Paul in on that just for a moment or two. Kim, with your sort of God's eye view over the national story, the national picture, would you like to add in any way to what Claire has just said about the way the Southwest's plans and strategies can dovetail in the hydrogen story with other regions?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Nick. I think there's something that's really resonated as I read through what everyone said so far, Jackie, Phil, and Claire, and it's all about the collaboration. I think I've heard a lot around us saying we need to collaborate and understanding. We need to see across our natural boundaries, whether, as Claire was mentioning, their geographic boundaries. So what we see as a region, actually in this case, could be 3 or 4 together, looking at a supply chain, because supply chains go across regions, and of course the networks do. But there's sectoral boundaries as well, because we are talking about, that's when we're talking about that aggregated demand. Aerospace and aviation have been in the same tracks for years. When was the last time Airbus maybe spoke to a bus manufacturer to learn something from them? Doesn't happen. Those boundaries need broken down as well as the geographic ones, and seeing across those boundaries and understanding we actually can learn from each other across that demand picture, and the sectors that feed into those demand pictures. And then the third aspect is actually technology boundaries. This will maybe come more in Paul's specialism, is as an engineer and someone who looks across from that demand side of where are the molecules going to be used, how are we going to transport and store them, how are we going to produce them. When you look across that, as an engineer, you're piecing together technologies, and there's gaps and there's question marks and some of that. Those boundaries between the companies, they've broken down as well. So there's different layers of boundaries and dimensions. Geographical, which I think was Claire was talking about, sectoral, that we've got to look across, and that aggregated demand across piece, and then regional. In terms of this greater region, shall we call it, between Wales, the west, the southwest, from my perspective, this was mentioned earlier actually in the Q&A session when I done, in terms of, well, how do we compete against other areas that are already started. We know about what's happening in the Humber. There's a lot happening where my accent comes from in Scotland as well. And that, for instance, the Orkneys, they've started just taking their own tidal and wave power and conducting it. How do you compete? I think it actually starts from looking at the demand. I think it's actually one of your, there's two strengths this combined region has, maybe three actually. One is some of the existing other solutions don't work, won't apply. Same in Scotland. Trains and things like that are not going to electrify, so I'm not going to put the infrastructure in as much. So they would need more hydrogen in those regions that are more rural than other regions. So you may have a demand advantage in some of that. And then there is the supply chain advantage. We've got so much engineering breadth and weight here because you've got the aerospace industry and Airbus. And the time is now, because Airbus is the supply chain master, as I referred to earlier, have said, look, we need hydrogen. So again, from an engineering perspective, you take that timeline of 2030 and you work back and you work off all of those areas, you can really start to find where is the opportunity. Where is the opportunity? For me, actually, the opportunity will be found in moving quickly, because then you grab the knowledge, capital, and the advantage. So even if you don't have enough demand to first justify all of Alstom's trains, learning by doing will mean that the knowledge, capital, and the engineering expertise and the people is held within the region. And that's where I think the opportunity lies. Paul, with that, I'll pass to you.
No,
yes, Paul, please.
I'm fascinated by this conversation because I think it is about people. We've got a fantastic cadre of people on this call. And when we think about it, those companies that we represent are developing really interesting, sustainable-minded people. David and I had a conversation last week with his sustainability team out of EasyJet. Simon and I had a conversation about Bristol Airport's need to become net zero by 2030. The motivations of the companies on this call and the employees and the paying public towards a sustainable future, no matter which form of transport, is a definite driver for us to build the successful, technology. But the technology is actually largely at our doorstep to be able to convert into something that could either fly or go along the rails or be on the waters. And we're not far away from that. And Simon and I are also in conversation. Sam Henley and I are talking about, couldn't we revitalize some technology that we developed a number of years back and put it into some defense arena that de-risks all of this in a very short timescale? Because one thing that we sometimes forget is we've also got defense on our doorstep in the southwest as well. And we couldn't do this without the opportunity to leverage that capability into the mix. So from a technology perspective, I don't think there's a richer region that can pull all of this together. And I talk about the wider region, and I spend a lot of time in Wales thinking about, that whole corridor. So I'm really interested in the reflections of David, Simon, and Guido on what I've just said.
Brilliant, Paul. Thank you. Simon Henley, I wanted to turn to you next, if I may. Of course, in addition to your role as business and industry strategy advisor at Reaction Engines, you're a past president of the Royal Aeronautical Society. So I want to just widen this out from a sort of aerospace God's eye view down. A high-level hydrogen strategy for the UK, as we heard from Ben Harrop, is on its way, and obviously desperately needed, and the details of it we need to get our heads around in order to move forward. What should its priorities be, do you think, Simon? And as that ex-president of the Royal Aeronautical Society, what has excited you about this summit's call to action?
Well, let me deal with the second one first, in a way. I think from the Royal Aeronautical Society point of view, I think it's an incredibly exciting time, and that is really, really vital at a time when the aerospace industry, because of COVID, is seen as being right now almost closed to entry. There are companies that are still running apprenticeships, but clearly lots of people are either furloughed or laid off at the moment. There is that excitement now that has been generated, and literally has come from almost, not quite from nowhere, but certainly vast acceleration in the last year around hydrogen, making aerospace, yet again, a really, really exciting place to work. Grandchildren. And when they grow up and come out of school, they will be the next generation of potential entries into aerospace. And I know from my time at Reaction Engines, where we've got 200-odd engineers, average age of 34, they will not tolerate our company working with technologies that are continuing to pollute the environment. And that's going to get more and more the case. The youngsters who are going to be coming out of school in 5 years' time simply won't go near industries that are polluting. So the excitement of the acceleration of hydrogen and zero-emission technologies in aerospace is going to attract a new generation, new thinking that we can really exploit. And that is going to be really, really relevant to the industries in the Southwest. As for the strategy, I pick up with what Kim was saying earlier about the importance of the end-to-end supply chain. There's a lot going on in the user community, and Jacqueline made mention of the funding that's available at the sort of the user end through things like ATI and various other places. But what is clear is that if all the users accelerate their efforts, which they are doing, then the constraining factor is going to be the supply of hydrogen into the UK, and the distribution, and the storage, and the standards that are required to transfer it. And that's the role that I think central government's got to play. And frankly, the UK's hydrogen strategy is late to need if we are to be a leader as an independent nation amongst the hydrogen communities. We really need to know, looking from sort of 2035, what we can postulate pretty easily what the hydrogen demand is going to be, and therefore what decisions we need to be making now in order to make sure that we can satisfy that demand and set priorities for who's going to use hydrogen first. It's very easy to do the things that are the easiest to do, and then find that you've used up all the hydrogen, leaving you the very hard things to do, and you haven't got hydrogen available. To me, transport is probably the hardest thing to decarbonise. Transport, particularly aviation, but lots of others, don't have many options when you're moving stuff around other than hydrogen as your net zero fuel. Other things that are potential users of hydrogen have options like renewable electricity. And the strategy really needs to set the priorities as to what we're going to do first, because they're the most important, and then direct every ounce of hydrogen that we have available to the things that can't be done in other ways. And that's why, to me, I'm sitting on my hands anxiously awaiting the hydrogen strategy.
Thanks, Simon. Ben Harrop of Bayes, thank you for your presentation this morning, which, for me at least, clarified a number of outstanding questions. I just wondered, I've got a specific question I'll come to you on in a second, but I just wondered if there was anything you wanted to add to that about what Simon's just said.
I think Simon's made some really clear and valid points there, and he wouldn't be the first stakeholder to have told us as such. I guess we do realise that the momentum has increased dramatically, in this space, and that there are a lot of strategies out there already, which the UK gets compared to. As I said, we're mindful that a strategy is one thing, and a big sum of cash that sits alongside it is good also. But until you get the nuts and bolts right of how you actually make businesses want to invest in this country, you're really struggling to make that into a kind of coherent picture that pulls this economy through. And so, really that, I hear the questioning of how we don't have a strategy yet relative to others, and ministers are alive to that. But I would say that they're also very alive to the fact that they want to get the kind of skeleton right that sits underneath that to actually make it an investable proposition for countries rather than just sort of a statement of intent, as some strategies could be suggested as being. So I guess that's one point I'd make. But as I hope made it clear in my presentation, we take this really seriously, and that's not just me as an official saying that. It's not even just my Secretary of State saying that. It's from the Prime Minister down. I guess we get it, and we're really trying to move forward. And we do see the next 10 years as a period of action, not just a period of sort of warm words. And yes, again, the kind of the pulling together. The great thing about hydrogen, as I've sort of learned in my job, is the kind of range of applications, the range of interests. The tricky thing about hydrogen is the range of applications and the range of interests, because you've got to pull all that together and do it in a way that makes most sense in terms of your emission reduction, that protects all of our money as taxpayers and spends that right, and does it in a way that brings business with you. So that's kind of the challenge. I'm hopeful that our strategy will kind of say more to answer those.
Brilliant, Ben. Thanks very much. Gutto, I wondered whether you'd like to come in briefly on that. We heard a great presentation from you this morning about the Welsh strategy. Is there anything at this stage, particularly in view of what you've heard at the summit so far, that you can say that might inform us pending the arrival of the UK hydrogen strategy?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah. Before that, I just see Kim, you've got your hand up. Did you want to follow up now, or shortly?
I'm happy to come in later on. Okay, so you go first, and I can come in later on. It's fine.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll crack on. Thank you. Yeah. Well, it's fascinating now listening to the discussion, and I'm just going back to what Paul said at the beginning about being long in the tooth. If you don't mind me saying that, Paul, in the hydrogen race. I feel maybe a couple of years ago, people were crossing the road to avoid me when I was speaking about hydrogen, and now my proverbial door is being knocked down more often than an Amazon delivery. It really is an exciting time to be in this space. But yeah, as the previous speakers from Bays has said, and others as well, it's seeing the wood from the trees almost, isn't it? There's so much that can be done, but there has to be some focus on the initial activities and the delivery of those as well. It takes me back almost, this collaboration. It's 2012 since I picked up the phone and phoned Hydrogen Sweden to ask them whether they wanted to bring their European hydrogen road tour to the UK. So they said yes, and then I panicked and said, okay, let's put on a show. So with Mercedes, Daimler, Toyota and Honda, there was a fleet of fuel cell cars which came to Cardiff. First Minister did a launch here at the Millennium Centre. We went on to Bristol. There was council leaders there who were at an event, at a breakfast event, and then on to Swindon, and then on to London at the City Hall, and the Deputy Mayor was launching that event. And this is 2012, nearly 10 years ago. So, a lot has happened then, but not enough perhaps. There was talk then of a hydrogen network connecting Wales with the southwest of England. That was the whole point of the road tour. It was saying essentially that the technology was ready. Okay, the car that Daimler let me have in my drive overnight, just outside my window, was worth more than my house. But energy costs have come down rapidly since then, and the technology was available. It's even more readily available, but it's that network thing, that chicken and egg debate, which hopefully can go away quickly now. So there has to be collaboration, coordination, and not just in the London area either, because there is a network of filling stations in and around London, but you don't want to spend your life just driving around the M25. We need to connect across the regions, across the countries, up to Scotland and to Wales as well. So that could be an early hit, yeah? Somebody mentioned transport. just now as one of the hardest to deliver. So transport is an initial key focus, I would have thought, as you cascade into others. And that's why we're coordinating with the Welsh strategy on transport as an initial market, if you like, matching the supply with the demand. And the Holyhead Hydrogen Hub is almost a microcosm of that, looking at transport applications, but also obviously working with Wales and West Utilities, with the South Wales Industrial Cluster, with the North East Wales Industrial Cluster on hydrogen for decarbonising those markets as well. This is one of the problems. So much can be done, but it's also one of the appeals, isn't it? But looking at what Germany's doing, the EU, countries around the world, I don't think it's too controversial to say that maybe the UK and Wales is a little bit behind the game, but you can catch up and hopefully rapidly accelerate. And looking at Scotland's hydrogen strategy recently as well, everything is pivoting in the same kind of direction, but it's a case of cracking on. Literally, if you're looking at electrolysis or steam methane reformation, and getting some products in on the market.
Fabulous, thank you. Kim, would you like to come in on that? Just before you do, actually, I'm having a few problems with my hand up icon. So if anyone has a question, if they want to jump in, just please make your presence felt with a yell. Kim, over to you.
So yeah, thanks, Nick. There was a couple of key things that I wanted to pick up on there and put some numbers and some meat on the bone behind. So one is around the production and the gap. I think it was Simon who picked up on it. So in the government's 10-step plan, step 2 hydrogen is for production of 5 gigawatts. If you look at the national grid scenarios, long-term scenarios of demand for energy across the UK, they're saying you could be seeing hydrogen demand of 42 to 47 gigawatts in the same sort of horizon time. So there's your gap. There's some sizings of your gap already. What we've got in the government's 10-step plan number 2 is a tenth of the demand that's required. So as much as we are looking at other places, and it's right that we look at green and CCUS and other hydrogen options, it's right to look across the piece. There's still an opportunity there, and I still think there's an opportunity to look at nuclear as well as part of that mix for feedstock electrons. To be fair to government, though, one thing I observed from that helicopter view, standing back and independent, is government want to help, but they need a clear, cohesive voice from industry to say how, almost. I'm not averse to being a bit bossy sometimes and telling people what to do, and I think sometimes it's useful if you want to galvanise action. Because the industry voice and demand voices are segregated, government are getting pulled in different directions. So I think industry needs to collaborate and help with government understand where and how is the right time for them to build the bridge. Government and public sector play a role in bridging from feasible technology to commercially feasible, which is is the technology valley of death, helping us take the risky bits of getting the action, learning by doing, first prototype end-to-end projects, and helping create the right environment for that bridge is how government, I think, will bridge us to that commercially viable price point. And the key around that is we do need to look at the technology maturity within that. And what I mean by that is, right now, green hydrogen is 5 times the cost of grey. 5 times. That's very equivalent for us in aviation and aerospace to know that SAF and biofuels is 3 times across the kerosene jet A1 fuel. But look at what's happened in solar and things in the past. Where you start acting, you bring that differential down quite quickly, and that's where I think government's role is in helping. And finally, we mentioned risk before and commercial risk. This is another area where I think we can bring in examples of where industry has solved problems in the past. The energy industry always has commercial risk. You don't build oil rigs without commercial risk. How do we manage that? Joint ventures, we share it. We share it across companies and balance it. That's part of it. Again, government provided an environment that gives you a floor as part of that de-risking piece. But actually, joint ventures is collaboration. It's working across companies. The example of the consortium-led approach in Copenhagen, I think, is exactly the way we should be going. And the other aspect of that collaboration, a big blocker to that technology collaboration is competitiveness, as we all want to keep our own IP, which is absolutely understandable and right for commercial advantage. But we've ways in other industries to fix that as well. Because if you want to share competitively sensitive information, you have a clean team in the middle. So what you do in M&A deals, you can do the same thing in technology. I've seen it done in joint ventures before. You can do the same thing in technology. So we have tools from other industries. We can de-risk. There is an opportunity with that size of production gap still there. And really we need to just get moving to be able to bring down that commercial differential.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kim, very much. You raised some very interesting points there, and I want to bring in David Morgan now. David, as Director of Flight Operations and lead on future flight for technology at EasyJet, what would EasyJet, or what indeed have you learnt from what you've heard about the initiative in the Southwest as presented over the past couple of days? And what role potentially might EasyJet play in it, do you think?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I mean, it's fabulous to be here, and it's no coincidence that we've got an airline here. I mean, this is about our very existence in the future. And, you know, we absolutely see hydrogen playing a major role in the survival of aviation going forward. And people sometimes ask me, you know, where about in the portfolio of short, medium, long haul, you know, does hydrogen sit? Well, actually, I believe it sits right across the portfolio because, you know, at the lower end of the scale with hydrogen fuel cells, you know, potentially moving into hydrogen combustion for longer ranges, and where there is no kind of feasible solution at the moment, you know, power to liquid fuels using hydrogen for those really hard to abate areas of aviation, you know, is absolutely applicable. So we are very much committed to supporting industry develop this infrastructure that's going to be needed. And a few colleagues have said it earlier, but you know, the wonderful thing about hydrogen is that it doesn't really matter, you know, where you create it. Once you've got hydrogen, you can use it in such a wide range of applications. And it's going to be vitally important for us to understand and start using it wherever we can as early as possible, whether it's around the airport environment and so on. And the Southwest is a fantastic place. You know, apart from being a Welshman, which I myself, being born in Cardiff, so I feel very at home here. You know, we can see this as almost the spiritual heart place, potentially of hydrogen into aviation, and nothing would give me greater pleasure than to be able to operate an EasyJet zero emissions aircraft out of Bristol Airport as a kind of showcase in the future. I think it's worth bearing in mind that, you know, when you look at an airline like EasyJet, which is one of the largest airlines in the world, you know, 75% of our flights, our network, are less than 1,000 miles, and 40% are less than 600 miles. So you really start to bring this technology into reach for the sort of applications that we need. And so very excited to be here, and we see ourselves playing a major role in supporting the industry. We are obviously well connected with governments and industries and so on, and we want to do our part in bringing this into play.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. Thank you very much indeed. Actually, as good luck would have it, next to you on my screen is Simon Earls, who is Planning and Sustainability Director for Bristol Airport. Hi, Simon. I wanted to bring you in because I wanted, if you could, to tell us a little bit about going beyond the pure platform side of aviation. Tell us a little bit about the joined up hydrogen ecosystem that actually flows from the aircraft themselves into infrastructure, and what can Bristol Airport do to sort of lay that out so that we can see the entire ecosystem from platform to even things like ground transportation.
Nick, thank you. Hello, everyone. And a really inspiring session, and does leave me with the thought, what's really stopping this region from becoming a global centre for clean aviation growth, with hydrogen right in the centre of that. And David, let's make that inaugural flight happen. That would be a wonderful thing to see. So, I mean, what's the role that Bristol Airport can play in all of this? I think fundamentally, I see it as a role as a test bed. Obviously we're an infrastructure provider. That's what we do. We supply facilities for customers like EasyJet to support their network. We are a contained environment, so a privately owned site. Yes, it is highly regulated, but it does, in a contained site, provide the opportunity for us to do things that might be more challenging elsewhere. Of course, we can provide incentives for our customers, create the right environment for this technology to be trialled. You know, we're proud to be part of one of the recently funded Future Flight consortia, where the airport's being used as a real life test bed for some of that new technology. But as you say, Nick, the other thing that the airport does offer is multiple use cases. So whether it's hydrogen flight, whether it's hydrogen ground equipment, as David mentioned earlier, or if indeed it's the buses that arrive at our public transport interchange from around the region, or indeed the buses that run around our site. You know, we've got multiple opportunities to apply the technology in that and that environment. And I suppose the last thing that I think that Bristol Airport can do to help is to have that desire and ambition to make things happen. So, you know, we have been following a fairly ambitious strategy for some time to reduce our carbon emissions. We have managed to decouple those from growth, so we've seen CO2 per passenger half in the last 10 years during a period, notwithstanding this year where we've seen almost exponential growth. But the scope 3 element, of course, of the footprint is the massive one. And whilst we've seen some very significant steps in that, so the Airbus Neo that we see a lot of David's team flying in and out of the airport, 15% fewer carbon emissions than its predecessor. You know, those are massive steps. You know, the wings designed in our region. And we need bigger steps, and we need those bigger steps to come sooner rather than later. And the role we can play is to help to showcase that. And not only by making them happen in the region, but I think also acted as an exemplar internationally and nationally. So that, I mean, the UK industry in aviation has taken a really impressive leadership position when it comes to decarbonisation. The Sustainable Aviation Net Zero Roadmap was the first global example of the sector coming together to commit to net zero. Big focus on SAF. We need that organisation to now turn its attention to other areas such as hydrogen. And I suppose the last thing that we can do is the gateway into the region. In 2019, 9 million passengers came through our front door. There's a great platform there to showcase the brilliant things that are happening in the region and to introduce technologies like hydrogen to our customers, and that's something we should take advantage of. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Simon. Very much indeed. Ben Rhodes, Deputy Director Southwest at the CBI. None of us need reminding, it's been a terrible year and it's going to get worse before it gets better. How critical is it for the region, if you could just paint a picture for me and the rest of the audience, how critical is the green revolution to the recovery of the region?
Thanks, Nick. I mean, it's incredibly critical, and I certainly agree with others on the call that there's a great opportunity here for the Southwest, and I agree with Phil as well that actually the competition is incredibly stiff, and in order for the region really to grasp this opportunity, we have to make sure that we're collaborating and coordinating our response when we're talking to government. In order to have any impact whatsoever. I guess understandably, just taking a step back and thinking about what some of the things raised during the call, the CBI is focusing very heavily on government policies and importantly the regulatory frameworks that we're going to need to try and enable these technologies and the appropriate supply of hydrogen that they'll require. So, we've got some really clear asks of government that at the top level that really will help to sort of push these technologies forward and the availability of hydrogen. And I'll just run through them very briefly because I think it's quite important. Certainly somebody mentioned, I think Kim mentioned that actually being really clear about what we're after is really important. So firstly, we're calling on government to introduce some variations to the contracts for difference auctions to really allow some of the fixed costs, the CapEx costs, and the variable costs of production to be recouped. We're calling on a significant investment in terms of the hydrogen testing programs and demonstration projects across the country. So £1 billion we're asking the government to invest in production, storage and distribution. And I guess importantly as well, we're asking for an update to the gas safety management regulations, which will allow greater flexibility for the injection of hydrogen into the gas grid. So some really key asks of government from the CBI at the national level to try and support what is a great opportunity for the Southwest, but the country as a whole.
Fabulous. Thank you, Ben. Toby Savage, Leader South Gloucestershire Council and Deputy Mayor Wecker. My question to you actually is sort of born of personal experience as well. I hope I've got this right. In a former life, you were a communicator. Your private sector business was in communications. As a storyteller myself, I'd really like to hear how you feel the Southwest tells its story going forward to sort of deliver maximum impact. As I said earlier, you've got a fantastic history of invention and innovation. How do you capture this, do you think, Toby, and sort of tell it to its maximum advantage so the story is heard where you need it to be heard?
Thank you for that introduction and the question. So you mentioned a few of the sort of roles that I have. I think the role that I've got, which I want to focus on in answering now, is my role as Deputy Chair of the Western Gateway, because I think that's it's important to recognise that Western Gateway region, that is spanning a really wide geography. Swansea to Wiltshire, Gloucester to Salisbury. But I think as our equivalent in our area to the Northern Powerhouse and the Midlands Engine, that gives us the flexibility to work with neighbours in all directions and to be flexible where we've got projects that demand this and as we've heard from speakers, there's so much that we can point to within our region that shows the potential that we've got to really embrace this agenda. And I think there are two projects that I do help to bring to life the story, and that is the submission that we'll be doing tomorrow as a region to support the Great Western Freeport bid. That's a really exciting opportunity to be able to help new businesses to cluster within our region, and we've got a very strong case, and are pulling out all the stops to make that to be able to pull that off. And then the second one, which we'll be actually submitting at the end of next month, will be a bid that we're working with colleagues across Nuclear Southwest for a fusion prototype site nomination because of our strong nuclear background within the region, the sites that we know we've got, including within my own authority at Oldbury. And that's a really important opportunity for us to be able to land a key hydrogen asset within the region, where, as we've heard, there's such a strong skill set and industry that can really help us with that. As a Western Gateway, we all need to be working together to tell that story. And actually, a plug that in the next couple of weeks, we want to be advertising for some additional business representatives to join us on the Western Gateway in order to help. Myself as deputy chair, Catherine Bennett as our chair, a key figure in aerospace locally, and no surprise given the importance of aerospace on both sides of the Severn estuary, as well as my colleague Jane Mudd, who's also the deputy chair of Western Gateway, and she's the leader of Newport City Council. So we can all help to tell the story, and most importantly for me, telling that story back to ultimately the people that we're all doing this for, which is the residents within the region who look to us as political leaders and business leaders and other stakeholders to make sure that we can unleash the full potential of our region and the people within it.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Toby. Helen Isles, I come to you, and I'm sorry for the wait, but we've had a lot of panelists to get through. But yours is an important task here, Helen. As Senior Policy Advisor, West of England Combined Authority, can you talk us through what role you think WECA can play in aligning the region and central government in particular behind initiatives such as this? And I'm reminded, from everything that I've heard today and the last couple of days, which is very exciting, when I go to big aerospace exhibitions internationally, you often see clusters, cluster regions being sold very successfully internationally. I wonder how exportable you think this initiative can be to the rest of the world.
So thanks very much. I think the role that the West of England Combined Authority can play is similar to the roles that we've all talked about collaboration and the themes that Claire and Toby have picked up on in terms of kind of working as those convener roles, thinking about the regional geography and how we can set those directions going forward, and working with our partners in industry. So as the West of England, we have declared a climate emergency. We want to be carbon neutral by 2030. So very much any of these ambitions kind of are in line with that, and we would want to see how we could kind of drive that forward. I think we've all been quite open in our kind of declaration of a climate emergency, in that we don't know the direct pathway to achieve that carbon neutrality. So we're looking for different ways that we can innovate, recognising that the West of England does have that strong history of aerospace engineering, of innovation, and we would want to be able to build on that. But then also recognising that we do need to work quite closely in partnership with our industry partners and government. We're not going to tackle this alone. So I think a role for kind of anyone here is around that collaboration role, really, and that coordination role, being that spokesperson between government, industry, our unitary authorities, our businesses, our residents, thinking about what the appropriate geography is, so that we have that kind of key and consistent ask. I think we've all spoken about how, hydrogen has a wealth of opportunities and chances that we could all take advantage of. It's about understanding how we can drive that forward, really, and what the opportunities are going forward, and having that consistent ask. And I think that's something that, as a combined authority, we will hold our hands up to. That's something that we need to probably do a bit more investigation around, and that's where I think we would look to industry to kind of help and guide around that as well. In terms of kind of it being able to kind of the attractiveness across the global world, I think it's certainly there. This is obviously something that, increasingly as the UK has the presidency for COP26, eyes are on us as a country around what's going on. Anyone that can be taking those first bits of innovation, producing these products and being able to go from there and make it saleable, or providing a clear pathway and providing that technology, providing that advice and guidance, is going to be in a winning position, certainly.
Just can I add to that, Nick? I mean, I'm getting constant calls from Californian startups in hydrogen who want to come to the UK, and it's a great point in time where I think we can exercise these capabilities on our shores and actually become world leaders in something. And I think the Southwest particularly has an interest in things like composites and containing and storage. I think Simon picked up on that point earlier. There are some really fundamental technology challenges that have been solved or are being solved only in the UK, in the Southwest. And so, I mean, I would add to that, Helen, in terms of, it isn't just about us putting ourselves on the world stage to export. There's also the inward investment opportunities that will come from this.
The key thing for me also, Nick, is we've lost the capability in the Southwest of having that infrastructure around the Filton airfield. Huge developments historically came out of that BA Systems and formerly, the Bristol Aerospace Company. We've got to look at our assets around the region and, as Paul's just said, sell that expertise so that companies like Zeoavia know that they can come into a place, maybe Exeter, we've got Virgin Orbits going into nuclear, so we can do this, but we've got to draw people into the region as well as trying to export out. We will export out once we've maintained the skills and gained the thing, but it is a balance that we've got to.
Fabulous. Thanks, Colin. And I'm conscious that we are sort of racing towards the bottom of the hour. We've got about another 10 or 15 minutes or so. Before I turn this over to Paul and Colin again, because what I want to do is see how we can corral what we have learned over the past 3 days. What can we batten down in terms of what we've learned, in terms of commitments, in terms of who will do what and roadmaps, so that we can begin to cement a kind of charter going forward to turn all of this enthusiasm and excitement into something real, happening, and which can be submitted as a showcase for what the region can do. So before I turn to Colin and Paul Pereira about that, I just want to see if any of the panel has a question. We've probably got time for a question or two. Just raise your hand if you have, because I think now I've got to you all. If there aren't any questions...
I think Phil had his hand up there, if I can...
Phil.
Check.
I think you have an old hand, Nick. Thank you.
Go ahead.
That was an old hand, Nick. I think we just said.
Old hand. Good. All right. Splendid. So that being the case, Colin and Paul, in the 10 or 15 minutes or so that's available to us, Paul, first of all, would you like to summarise what we've heard? And
yes.
In terms of takeaways, what is it that you want to grasp and sort of move forward with from all of this?
So I think that the first thing is there's a beginning to be an alignment of a common vision. We have to write it down. And if we're not all going to be putting our name to a piece of paper with our signatures on it, then we'll all possibly walk in different directions from this call. So my pledge to you is to try and, with Kim and maybe Simon's help, put together a single page. This is a statement and pledge that we all would like to sign up to. Because once we've got that on our frame and our wall and in every conversation, we can then begin to act against it. So I think that, Kim, if you're happy with the support you've been giving to this whole conurbation around the hydrogen community of the Southwest, we'll have a go at that. The second thing that I picked up out of this series of conversations is how important, and I think, Simon, you picked on it, skills really is. We have a real challenge. I'm a board member of the Ingenuity, what was SEMTA, as a non-exec, and we can see a real challenged. Not that we haven't got jobs that are going to be coming, but we haven't got them right now. And so we need them for the purposes of getting the careers defined. I know, Ben, you've put some comments there. We really need to get that link up between the skills part of the BEIS and your hydrogen strategy so that we've got the right kind of education. Right now, I've been told there are gaps in our knowledge across the UK which we can't plug, even on programs as significant as Fly Zero. I know that I spoke to ZeroAvia. They're trying to recruit heavily in hydrogen fuel cells. I'm pretty sure my predecessor's company in GKN is struggling to find the right people as well, as we start having all the money. But if the people aren't there to go and make these great ideas real, then we won't have a solution. So we need to get the skills piece going pretty quickly. And then the money does come. We do need to build on the back of your great work, Ben, on the hydrogen strategy, to put some really foundational building blocks that are significant. And Simon Earls and I have been talking about what we could do with, getting moving on hydrogen on the apron. Are there things now where we could start putting the basis of a hydrogen airport down so that we've got real operations rather than wait for another 10 years and then discover it's too late? And, David's already ordered his hydrogen aircraft from someone, that we're actually there ready to take the first flight, as you said. And I'd love to be on that flight with David. So those are my little takeaways. But what I would take away from all of this is there's a real passion and commitment across the communities. And I wanted to thank you all for being here with us in this journey. And over to you, Colin, in terms of your takeaways.
Yes, thank you, Paul, and thank you for all the panelists. I was just commenting to my good lady who's been watching what we've been doing over the last 3 days. I think one of the things I've learned, and one of the positives of COVID, I could not have got all you people as panelists in a room prior to COVID. So that is a big plus that we're able to speak. The key thing for me, and why I set this up after discussions, is I fundamentally learned during my time at Leonardo, especially doing research and development and technology scouting for them across Europe, is the Europeans and our competitors work much more regionally. They invest into a regional structure, and then they support within region in terms of what their industry is doing. We have a bit of a fragmented approach within the English setup, and I don't want to go into the politics of RDA against LEPs. We are where we are, and we have to move forward. But I think we need a call to arms in terms of a drawing together an action series of people to talk about the industrial side, and then work with the geopolitical side to get a message, to get an ask in terms of what we've got to do. What is actually achievable in terms of tangible things? So, for instance, do we actually want to press for a large-scale electrolyser or hydrogen production facility to support the Southwest? Key thing for me on what I've learned on the supply side. We need to work that out. We then also need to understand is, once we've got a potential supply coming through, what are we going to use the hydrogen we're producing for? And the other key thing is, I really learned in terms of how much more cross-sector innovation will be needed within this new ecosystem, whereas before in the past we've probably been very sort of sector driven and in our silos, and never the twain shall meet. Certainly the inspiration that came from what rail needs and what rail is doing will give us a short-term demand cycle while we can concurrently develop the skills and the projects coming out of Fly Zero and the work that Airbus will do. Because again, if we can get people working in rail and then build up skills on hydrogen fuel cells, there will be then transferable skills when we start thinking about the aircraft systems in manufacture. So we are in the start. We're almost, it's almost the tortoise and the hare. It doesn't mean that because we're slightly late in getting moving as a region, that ultimately we can't get to the finish line ahead of other parts. I think there is time. I think there are opportunities. And I think, the key thing for me is we've really got to do something. We've really got to identify whether it's small scale developments going down to SMEs through a net zero equivalent of NATEP or the DASA projects, whether it's what the supply chain is going under the fantastic projects like GKN and the hydrogen project in aerospace, what we can do in terms of bus and truck and maybe ground support equipment in the early days for things like Bristol Airport, to get them used to the new technologies, be it electric, be it hydrogen. I think we just got to get going. That's the key thing for me. Let's get a group, a call to arms. I've already talked to Phil Smith from the Industrial Styles, and Ben sits on my board. I've said earlier today that I've got a website that we're going to launch called Southwest ZTech, Zero Emissions Technology and Engineering Cluster, that we can draw ourselves and put stuff up for the Southwest. I'm sure Phil and Ben and I can work together and corral the big primes then and work out what we've got to do. And then if we can then bring together the Western Gateway, the Great Southwest, and the LEPs, the West of England, G4, and down into Dorset, heart of the Southwest and Cornwall, I think we can really start collate a message which then supports Ben and the team in Bays, and then cross sections of DFT, and we mustn't forget the implications we've got to do then into the Department of Education, because we all talk about skills, but Bays and DFT don't educate our children and our university students. That's in the Department of Education. So there's a lot to do. I think we're on the starting line, but I think we can catch up, and I really firmly believe we've got a great future.
So I guess the next step, Nick, for me would be, we want to document some of this conversation. Hopefully those that are on this call would be happy for us to provide a recording back to them, but also for us to use it as the content to create the first draft of what that strategy might look like, and get your support to taking it that next step further in line with the hydrogen strategy work that central government's doing. So we've got 3 months. If everyone wants to give me a thumbs up, then we'll get going.
Well, I'm seeing lots of thumbs up there, Paul, and that's a brilliant note on which to end. And I note just as positively that we are ahead of the curve in terms of the schedule and the time, the agenda. So well done, everyone. It just remains for me, obviously, to thank everyone on the panel. It was an extremely interesting an educational discussion for me, and I know for the audience as well. Paul and Colin, I'm going to hand back to you and thank you for a wonderful event, both of you. It's been terrific, and thanks for having me on board.
Well, again, thank you, Nick, for joining us on this and taking the time, because I know you are one of my inspirations for doing something about climate action. So thank you for being that leader and showing us the way to communicate and really helping us through this journey. So again, thank you. And all the panel, I'm sure, will have enjoyed the conversation. So let's not leave this thought without taking the action that we've committed to. So I will stay on for a few more minutes as we've got that time, and I'll answer any questions that have popped up in the chat. But by all means, you can just leave now, or you can continue on to listen to what we've got in the questions and see if we can answer some of them. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. So, well, thank you all again, and I'll leave the teams going, and those that have to leave, then thank you. And I can see lots of applause in the way of thumbs up. I think this platform has allowed us, Colin, as you said, to do something subtly different. And what I'm really pleased by is how much great attendance that we've had throughout. So firstly, again, thanks to the audience that stayed with us. We've got 100 people on day 3 of a fairly long and enduring conference, and I would say some really clear actions coming from each of the sessions. I want to say a special thanks to 2 people on this team who have kept with me through my little journey, and Kim, Simon particularly. Every Friday we try and catch up and keep moving the ball on. And David, thank you specifically for being that constant support since I came with a few ideas to you. So let's keep that going. And I hope Ben, you'll continue the journey with us. So thanks for joining us. And if you'd like to, we'll continue our Friday calls where all this is happening, Kim. So maybe we should extend the audience. It might make our jobs a little bit easier.
Indeed, happy to invite anyone in that wants to join our call, regular catch-ups on this.
Yeah, and really, seriously, Ben, I think we recognise there's a big strategy, but I think there's some people on this call that can really help with that. Anything that we can do to support you, please do get us involved.
I think that's the key message from us, Ben, is we want to do something and we want to give you as much information to help you do your job in BEIS and get this communication flow going.
So Ben was about to say something. So.
No, just to reinforce what you guys said before about trying to bring one voice for the region. I know that isn't always an easy thing to do, but there's actually some really good examples of places that are doing a good job of that. I know Orkney was mentioned a little while ago, and they're actually a great example of, taking what was actually a problem. They didn't have a good enough, connection to the mainland to support all the electricity they were making, and saying, well, what can we do with that instead? And so becoming, a hydrogen hub and kind of storming along from there. Likewise, some of the industrial clusters have done a good job of basically bringing together a kind of disparate group, relatively disparate group of industries, and saying, well, here's how we would do it, to decarbonise our whole operations, using hydrogen and indeed using other technologies as well. So, play to your strengths and come together as one voice, because as much as I'd love to, it's very difficult to meet every kind of company that might be on this call, but hearing how a region wants to do that and how government can help is a good way of doing that.
And Ben, just on that point, we think the region's slightly broader, with the conurbation that sits across the water. Simon and I spent a bit of time with the Welsh government. We think that they've got a really good plan ahead. We're going to be complementary with what we're doing rather than competing. And I think that's also important. And, from a top-down perspective, I think, David, we need a solution that works in all parts of the country. It doesn't have, it can't, and all parts of the world. So we need to step ahead and start making some real moves now in unison. So I think, David, you'd only enforce that, we can't have an aircraft with only one hub in the UK.
I'd like to pick up on that piece precisely, Paul. Ben, what I would say is watch the states on this. Now Biden's in power, they're going to move fast, and if we don't, they won't come up. But the fact we've got the ability now to possibly partner with them and make a global solution that is led by maybe a transatlantic partnership and this sort of thing could be very interesting. The other aspect I think that we've got at our hands, Paul and I were talking about learning from ventilator. Look at what we've managed with vaccines, with regulation. By having that in our hands in our own timeline, look how we've managed to accelerate that. I think that's actually quite interesting from a UK USP or control perspective as well. And we've got control of that.
I think for me, you look back in history and look at the energy changes, the introduction of steam and the switch from steam to then diesel, they happened quite rapidly. And I think once the demand signal and even the internet, once things actually happen, industry can actually develop things very rapidly, and the ventilator challenge proved that. I think the key thing is to get the momentum going and actually.
So I think the catalyst is David, and I think with the airlines pushing like you, David, to really embrace the net zero economy and trying to make sure that the OEMs get the right solution in place, and thanks for the leadership on that. What are your thoughts about how we can help you in any way?
I think it's been fascinating, and it's been a real privilege to be speaking to people who are so passionate about the subject, as we are. And, we've just put 2 people into the Fly Zero program on secondment from EasyJet. And I would really like to see that program driving into something that materializes in the Southwest, frankly. And, so I think, if we can get some tangible results out of that, as part of the program, and I'd be very happy to facilitate, discussions outside the formal discussions, if you like, with Fly Zero, together with the people that we have within the team, with others, so that we can start to understand what that means.
That's really helpful.
Paul, I do have I just have a picture in my head, having sat on the Welsh Government Hydrogen Reference Group and listened to the development of their strategy and effectively the for want of a better word, the hydrogen highway coming down the M4. And given Kim's stark expose on the figures of the current level of ambition and the 10-point plan versus the likely need for hydrogen, we will be a net importer. And please God, it's green hydrogen, not brown or blue hydrogen. Well, blue maybe, but carbon capture to me is going to be an issue anyway. You could just see the nucleus, as well as the stuff that's supposedly going to be coming ashore from the North Sea into the sort of northeast as a hub. Wales, as an importer of green hydrogen from those that have an excess, whether it's a stranded UK site, so somewhere like Orkney that's got natural resources but isn't connected into the grid, or if it's Saudi that's actually got half the desert turned to solar energy producing ammonia, and it comes ashore as ammonia, but then comes down in either ammonia form or in hydrogen form down the M4 with little spurs coming in with what's going on in Wales in terms of buses, some of those other things, ending up in Bristol Airport, starting with the ground equipment, the buses, the things we could do frankly now. And then as we get to aeroplanes, and David, when we do get you to reaction engines, we can talk about whether we can use ammonia in a NEO type aeroplane rather than have to wait for a brand new hydrogen aeroplane. All of those things, you could really see something building almost starting now, and that's what I think you see whether we can do anything with that.
Simon, I think that picture that you've articulated is exactly what's in my head, and almost to the point. I think the Western Wales is going to be the key to this, and I think that there's huge amounts of capacity to make that vision real, and I think that now's the time to write it down and then make it real.
We need to be cognizant though of the M5 corridor as well, and the advantages that bringing into the picture, including places like Exeter Airport in terms of development hub, as I said, because we've lost Fulton, that we can trial things at Exeter under a more safe regime and then feed them into what is a very busy airport in Bristol, but look at it as a community across the southwest and Wales, so that when we go to government we get the bigger ask, and therefore we get more oomph, because what I have found, if you put it down into smaller areas, the government will pick it off and put it into the larger regional message in terms of like the Tees Valley or the Northwest, because they get more bangs for their bucks. So it's part of the mix.
You've invited yourself to our Friday Hydrogen Strategy Club, so you're very well.
Oh, I'm pretty passionate, as you can well imagine. The other thing I want to prevent for all the people staying is the experience with Leonardo had is I'm absolutely passionate about the regions, and also tapping into that European money that the government through the Brexit deal is going to pump into Horizon Europe. We have a funding pot there that we should go after, because the Europeans will go after it. Certainly the UK and the regions should go after that, because our government is going to contribute to it. So I think that is another facet in terms of getting development projects under Clean Sky 2. We know they fund tangible development projects in reality, physical things, not studies. And I think going forward under Horizon Europe, the next phase of Clean Sky 3, if it is that, will maybe help us get things like that infrastructure into Bristol Airport. And so I think we've got two doors to knock on, as well as Westminster and maybe Cardiff. I think Europe could also a door on in terms of getting.
So, Colin,
I'm sorry, I've got to jump off on.
Say thank you. Thank you again, David. I didn't want to hold you up. Thank you very much. Thank you, Simon. And I'll catch up really soon.
Thanks, David. We'll talk soon. Catching up soon. We'll get that visit in sometime.
yeah. Hopefully, the doors will be open anyway. Okay. Yeah.
So I'll stay. And just to say, everyone who's remained on the platform with us to this end, Colin, I just want to say thank you for your support in pulling this. Your team. I don't think I've been able to thank you enough, and I think there's a lot of people still online as we get to the end of our meeting.
I'd like to thank yourself and Nick and Kim in helping us put this together. Also, a bit of name check for people like Corinne Matthews from the Heart of the Southwest, and also Anthony Merritt west of England, and also my team, Belinda, Austin, who was ill with COVID, and we were worried about her before Christmas. So again, keep safe, everybody. We're still not out of the tunnel, but we're getting there. Sam Hamlin, who does all the events background work and does the donkey work, and Turnley Dimmery, who's helped me on the IT and done all the graphics and the information. I've got a fantastic team, and I hope it's been a learning curve for us, but I think in terms of the event, I couldn't have asked for more. I think it's really hit the nail on the head and given us an opportunity to get this exciting agenda onto the top of the conversation. So thank you again, Paul, for helping me get through this, both IT and both for moderating. And I'm sure we'll do the other one. I think the next one we've got to think about is electrification, and in terms of cross-sector technologies.
So what you might not know, Colin, I just peered at who's still online. There's 81 people still here, even the Trade Commissioner and the High Commissioner of Canada. So we've got an amazing audience. So I want to say thank you one last time for all those that have stuck with us. It's really impressive to see the passion, commitment of all of you and all the great questions. So the debate doesn't end here. You can always find me on LinkedIn, as many people know, and there's going to be more comments coming. So with that, I'll say thank you and close this session. And again, Colin, thank you very much for hosting us and bringing this all together with all the team.
It's been a pleasure, and thank you everybody for attending, making it such a great success. See you soon.
See you soon. Thanks. I'll see you backstage.